Hey everyone, welcome. Let's be honest, economics can feel massive, right? Super complicated. But what if I told you there's a simple trick to it, that you only really need two ways of looking at it to understand everything, from why your coffee costs what it does, all the way up to the biggest news headlines? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
Just stop and think about it for a second. The economy, it's just this gigantic, tangled web of businesses, governments, and literally billions of people making choices every single second. It can feel impossible, totally overwhelming. So where do you even start? How can you possibly make sense of all that without just getting completely lost? Well, you know what economists do? They have this brilliant strategy. They just split it in two. Yep, they just cut the whole massive thing in half. And believe it or not, that one simple move is the key. It's what unlocks our ability to actually understand what's going on.
And the names they gave these two halves? They come straight from ancient Greek, which is kind of cool. You've got micro, which comes from the word mikros, and that just means small. And then you have macro, from makros, which means large. Small and large. Super simple, right? But that distinction, it's everything.
And we actually have one guy to thank for this whole framework. This is Norwegian economist Ragnar Frisch. So way back in 1933, he's the one who officially came up with these terms. He gave economists this powerful new way to organize their thoughts. And honestly, we've been using it ever since.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's grab that first lens, the microscope. We're talking about microeconomics now. And with this, we are zooming way in. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty, looking at all the tiny individual pieces that make the entire machine work.
There's this quote from Professor A.P. Lerner that just nails it perfectly. He said that microeconomics is basically like looking at the economy through a microscope, to see how all the millions of little cells play their part. And those cells, that's us. That's you as a shopper, that's a single company making a product. It's all about figuring out the role each little piece plays. So yeah, that's the official definition right there. Microeconomics is all about those individual units. We're not talking about the entire U.S. economy here. Nope. We're talking about the specific choices you make every day. We're talking about how one specific business runs or, why the price of avocados suddenly goes through the roof. All right, let's break this down a bit more. A lot of the time, you'll hear microeconomics called price theory. And that's because, honestly, it's obsessed with how prices get set for individual things. To figure that out, it uses what's called a slicing method. Think of it like taking one tiny slice of the economic pie, say just the market for smartphones, and putting it under the microscope. By focusing on one thing at a time, it creates what they call a partial equilibrium. And a huge tool it uses is marginalism. It sounds complicated, but it's just about how we make choices based on that one extra thing. Should I work one more hour? Should I spend one more dollar? That's marginalism. And trust me, this is not just boring textbook stuff. This is super practical, real-world knowledge. Microeconomics is exactly what helps a company figure out the sweet spot, the perfect price for a new gadget to make the most money. And it's also what governments use to figure out, hey, if we put a tax on soda, how will people change their buying habits? It's incredibly useful.
All right, so we've put the microscope away. Now it's time to pull out the telescope. Let's zoom way, way out and take a look at macroeconomics. We're done looking at the individual trees. Now we're going to look at the whole forest.
And here's a really fascinating bit of history. For a really long time, pretty much all of economics was microeconomics. But then, the 1930s happened. The Great Depression hits. And suddenly you have these massive nationwide problems. We're talking huge unemployment, the whole economy just grinding to a halt. And the micro tools, they just couldn't explain what was going on. It was a total crisis. And that crisis opened the door for this guy, John Maynard Keynes. He completely changed the game by popularizing this big-picture macroeconomic way of thinking to tackle these enormous nationwide problems.
So that's what macroeconomics is. It looks at the entire economy as one giant thing. It completely shifts the focus. Instead of looking at your income, it's looking at the national income. Instead of one price, it's looking at the overall price level, what we call inflation. It is all about the big totals, the aggregates, total jobs, total stuff being made, and the growth of the whole economy. And this is really the DNA of macroeconomics. It's all about those aggregates, those big totals. And to do that, it uses a lumping method, which is a great name for it, right? It just lumps millions of different people and businesses together into one big unit to see how they behave as a whole. A really key idea here is general equilibrium. It's this recognition that everything is connected.
all the different markets influence each other at the same time. This idea of interdependence is absolutely critical. In the world of macro, if you change one thing, say business investment goes up, it's going to send ripples through the entire system, affecting everything from jobs to how much money people have.
And why does this matter? Well, the importance of macro is just massive. This is the toolkit that governments and central banks use to try and steer the entire economy. When you hear about them trying to fight unemployment, or get inflation under control, or just make sure the economy grows, they're using macroeconomic policies to do it.
Okay, so we have our two lenses, the microscope for micro, the telescope for macro. Let's put them right next to each other so we can see the difference crystal clear.
All right, let's go head to head here. The pattern is pretty obvious when you see it like this, right? Micro is all about the individual, while macro is all about the aggregate, the total. Micro cares about the price of one thing. Macro cares about the nation's total income. It really is the difference between asking, hey, how many people want to buy the new iPhone, versus asking, what's the total demand for everything being sold in the entire country? See the difference?
Okay, so this is all great theory, but let's get to the bottom line. Why does any of this matter to you? I mean, how do these two lenses actually help you make sense of your own life and what's going on in the world?
Well, microeconomics, that's your personal life. It explains the world immediately around you. It's the why behind things like your rent being so darn high. It's how your boss decided what to pay you. It's the reason that little coffee shop on the corner can afford to stay open. Micro is the economics of your day-to-day.
Macroeconomics, on the other hand, that's what helps you understand the news. Every time you turn on the TV or scroll online and hear about inflation, or the Fed raising interest rates, or the national unemployment numbers, yep, that's all macro. It's the big picture, the context for all those huge forces that are shaping the whole country.
But here's the most important part, the real takeaway. These aren't two totally separate things. They're just two sides of the same coin. They're deeply connected. Think about it. One single company decides to buy some new robots to save money. That's a micro decision, right? But what happens when thousands and thousands of companies all make that same decision? Suddenly, you've got a change in the national unemployment rate. That's a macro result. All those little tiny micro choices add up to create the massive macro trends we see in the news.
So there you have it. You've got the tools now. You have the microscope and you have the telescope for looking at the economy. So the next time you're reading a news story, or even just deciding what to buy at the store, ask yourself, which lens am I using to understand this? What will you choose to focus on?